something. I hope I learn something from the stormy seas, from the brightest days, from the darkest nights, from the sunny days. I hope you learn something. I hope you learn something. I hope you learn something from the stormy seas, from the brightest days, from the darkest nights, from the sunny days.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome to the Daily All Hat No Kettle News Rodeo. I'm your host, Hat. Starting to get the new opening down. A little bit at a time, right? A little bit at a time. For a guy with memory problems like me, I take the wins as they come. Hello. We are probably going to go long today. I know I say that a lot. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, but I just have a lot of stuff to pack in today. I have some really, really upsetting news about a home invasion that happened to the journalist Glenn Greenwald in a farm that he's renting in Brazil. And also a story attached to it of an even more horrendous story of a home invasion that happened to an Asian family in Oakland, and how rampant that is becoming. And then for the after block, I have some big news on the reemergence of COVID in a couple countries, especially Canada and Brazil again, and how that may or may not tie into a certain rate of injections that we're seeing across the world right now. My take on that. But that, of course, will be in the after block, because if I talked about that on YouTube, they'd pull the channel. And then also on the after block, we're going to talk about the story that I teased for those two, DLive and Trovo thumbnails, and that's the renewed assault on high, quote unquote, high-capacity magazines. Remember, folks, there's no such thing as a high-capacity magazine. A magazine has capacity, and some have more than others. That's it. That's like saying oh, it doesn't matter. I was going to come up with an analogy, but it doesn't make any sense, so screw it. I just pulled a Biden there, didn't I? So, without further ado, I'm on the wrong page. Please excuse me. Let us get to our first of two Babylon Bee bookends. This is the one on the left. And thank you so much, Ray. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you so much. And this one is from their politics section. NASA ends Mars mission after finding out planet has no early voting. And here you can see a picture of a Mars probe circling about the Great Red Planet across the rift. And as you can see, I don't see a voting station in sight. Dateline Houston, Texas. NASA made a surprise announcement this week. It will cease all missions to the planet Mars. This happened after a number of activists pointed out that Mars completely lacks any early voting, raising the specter that any mission to Mars would support voter suppression. NASA director and founder Bob NASA, quoted as saying, "We here at NASA are in favor of voting rights, and we can't in good conscience work with a planet that doesn't embrace those rights." Close quote. The move is expected to devastate the Mars economy, which is currently zero, but after exploration and colonization could eventually be more than zero. Mars supporters have pointed out that there is actually no record of any voter suppression or voting on Mars, but NASA insists that the important thing is that the planet appears to be for the restriction of voting. Said NASA, "Appearances are what matters most here." Close quote. Mars has been controversial as a target for exploration from the onset since it is a red planet. NASA is now instead setting its sights on a blue planet, Uranus, and plans to make all future missions there. Uranus is full of gas. They said it, folks, not me. The Babylon Bee starting us off. All right, my personal conceit, the markets. The markets just closed. A strong day. The Dow Jones was up a little over 1%. The S&P was up just under 1.5%, and the NASDAQ closed just under 1.7%. All strong days today. The Dow Jones closing over the 33,500 mark. So a good day there. Interestingly enough, gold slipped again, just 0.05%, but it is still down. And crude oil is currently down a full 4.36%, currently sitting at $58.76 per gallon of West Texas Intermediate crude. Barrel, not gallon. And if you look at the 6-month run for oil, you're going to see something very interesting. We saw, aside from a sharp dip back on the 1st of March, we've seen a steady climb in oil hitting as high as $66.09 a barrel. That was on March 5th. And then it's been a pretty steady decline with some ups and downs, but mainly downs. And again, so we'll have to keep an eye on oil and see what it's doing there. Demand is going to start picking up. We're getting into the summer months. Most of the industrialized nations are doing well on vaccinations, so travel restrictions are being lessened. The airlines are starting to open back up more. Although Delta, because of personnel problems, had to close 100 flights yesterday. 100 flights taken off the books because of personnel shortages. Interesting. But we all know that they're very, very much in favor of every legal voting right known to man, including no voter ID required whatsoever. So I'm sure they didn't have a problem with people like being out voting or anything like that. It's just Delta, after all, the world's largest airline. Who should be worried? Moving right along. Real quickly, Bitcoin has peaked above the $59,000 mark for the first time in a little while. Currently at $59.16 and change. It just ticked up another $3. Moving right along. All right. The last Capitol attack. We've got two of them. We've got January 6th riot, and then we've got the deadly attack that happened back on Friday the 2nd. And you remember in that instance, a man ran his car into a Capitol roadblock, killing one officer with the car and seriously wounding another, who, as I understand, is now out of the hospital. So God bless, and thank you all for your prayers for the injured officer. Now the attacker then got out of the vehicle and charged other officers with a knife, and he was shot dead and is no longer with us. So the big first thing that comes out is, who was this? Well, the man's name was Noah Green, um, not a Trump supporter. In fact, a black nationalist who is big with the Nation of Islam. He considers Louis Farrakhan to be an incarnation of Christ. That's a quote from one of his social media posts. So, of course, since this attack didn't fit the media narrative, no one talked about it again. Boom, it went away. I wonder out loud, and I really mean this in all sincerity, I really do. I wonder if the officer who died will be laid in state in the Capitol Rotunda like Officer Sicknick was. I wonder. How is one more of a hero than the other? I'd like to know. Let's see if that happens. And again, I'm not trying to be cute here. I'm not trying to be coy. I mean this very, very sincerely. This officer died as a direct result of an attack, as opposed to Officer Sicknick, for whose death we still don't know what the actual cause was. All we have is speculation from his family that it may have been a stroke, because the day of the riot on January 6th, Officer Sicknick tested his brother and said, "I'm okay. I got gassed a couple times. I got sprayed a couple times. Otherwise, I'm fine." And then the next day, he passed away. And he was laid to rest in state in the Capitol Rotunda. So I'm totally serious here. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Anyway, regarding the attacker, Noah Green, some more details are coming out about him from his family, that he has had a history of erratic behavior for a couple years now. He left his home in North Carolina, and let's make sure I get the states right here. I've got a lot of states in my head today. He let's see. Pardon me for scrolling here. He moved from the family home suddenly to Indiana. Pardon me, to Indiana. I shouldn't say Indianapolis. Moved to Indiana. Just boom, overnight. Boom, he was gone. And he had been complaining of paranoia and hallucinations since what he claimed was a Xanax drugging in 2019. He was playing football for Christopher Newport University. But he stated that teammates drugged him with Xanax in 2019, and then he started to have hallucinations, heart issues, and suicidal thoughts. And this is from Noah Green's brother, and I'm quoting an article by Zachary Stiver from the Epoch Times. Noah also said that he had lost his job due to afflictions, was facing fear, hunger, loss of wealth, and he also claimed government agencies were poisoning him and described the U.S. government as the, quote, #1 enemy of black people. So right now, we don't have any actual ruling on what the pure motive of this attack was. Would it be considered a terrorist attack? Would it be considered suicide by cop? We don't know right now. They're still working on that. But I doubt we're going to hear anything in any major way. Now, one thing that has been brought up about Noah Green's mental problems is that he had injuries during his time playing football. And that's according to a statement to the Washington Post from Noah Green's family. They said he was, quote, not a terrorist by any means, but that he was suffering from depression and potential mental illness, citing head injuries during his time playing football as a possible source. Okay, I'm gonna pretend to be a doctor here. As I understand it, the mental debilitation that comes with repeated concussions due to hard contact sports like football, as I understand it, those don't present themselves for some time after you've stopped playing, sometimes decades. So I'm not saying this is not possible with Noah Green, but in my opinion, again, as a pretend doctor, it is unlikely that those concussions that had happened so recently played any part in this particular thing. I think, again, playing a doctor, Noah Green was in the perfect age group to be afflicted with schizophrenia. I've seen it firsthand. I know exactly what it looks like. I was married to a schizophrenic. I know exactly how it hits, and I know exactly what it does to you. And again, playing a doctor, it looks to me like Noah Green was suffering from schizophrenia. And God bless his family. God bless the spirit of Noah Green, and certainly the officer who died. It's a horrible tragedy all the way around. All right. I didn't want this here. I'm going to move this. Disregard this story. All right. Let's get to Glenn Greenwald. As I said, Glenn Greenwald was the victim of a home invasion in Brazil just a little while ago. He was there at a farm that he is renting with his husband and their 2 children. His husband and their kids were in Rio de Janeiro at the time of the attack due to a last-minute change of travel plans. They're renting the place to be out of Rio during the epidemic, during the Wuhan virus epidemic. And I'll have something on Brazil and the epidemic in the after show. But Glenn describes a very, very harrowing incident. 5 guys with guns attacked him and his security detail. He had a security officer and a off-duty police officer with him. They were overpowered immediately. The officer was beaten quite badly. They kicked him so hard they cracked some of his ribs as they made him lie face down on the floor. And as I understand it from Glenn Greenwald's account of this, police officers are very, very high-value targets in Brazil. It is an incredibly dangerous position to have. And so I'm sure that, as Glenn Greenwald says, that was going through that officer's mind every second. And again, this lasted about an hour. They were demanding money and valuables. And Glenn, being the smart guy that he is, he doesn't keep money around. This is Brazil, after all. He has 12 dogs. 12 dogs, and these guys still were able to get through. So they were determined. But Glenn does describe them as being very amateurish. They kept changing their mind with plans at the last minute. They would start to make him do something, and then when it seemed like it wasn't going to work right away, they'd change their mind and go into some other silly scheme. And for some reason, they left his computer behind. And they tied him and his security people up with electrical cords and then made their escape after getting very little. They even stole kitchen appliances. That's how desperate these guys were. But they ran off, and Glenn was able to free himself and then used his computer to alert the authorities what had happened, and they got medical attention, et cetera, et cetera. At one point, Glenn was told to open his mouth, and they stuck a gun in his mouth. So this is obviously something that very few people whom we know have been through, and certainly would not survive without massive psychological scars. But to Glenn's credit, he did not make himself the focus of the article he wrote in which he describes this attack. Actually, he brought up another attack. And this is, first of all, this is his article. I'm going to put the link to it in the chats. Give me just a second to put it in the 3 chats. There we are, YouTube. There we are, DLive. And can't see it. There we go. There we are, Trovo. Let me erase that real quickly. Get that so I can see it for the next time. There we go. So it turns out, really the focus of this story, it's titled The Enduring Terror of Violent Crime Victimhood. Glenn brings up the story of a Vietnamese family in Oakland. They're not giving out their last name for fear of reprisals. But the mother's name is Roseni, and her husband have a 7-year-old daughter named Amy. They were home in their place in Oakland, and they were home invaded. They kicked in their rear glass door. The mother got into the bedroom where she was putting Amy to sleep and locked the door, but the attackers kicked the door in. They beat her husband severely, and they stole almost everything, including ancestral items that have been in the family for generations. And as we all know, the Asian community is very, very, very tied up in ancestor worship. And I don't mean that in any negative way. It's just the way it is. They look after their previous generations in a very, very strong manner, as opposed to some other Western cultures. And they stole some of those items that have, again, been in the family for generations. And it turns out the family also had basically their entire life savings there in the house. And so the home invaders got away with everything, absolutely everything. They even tore the little bracelets off the 7-year-old's arm. She has bruises on her arm for where they ripped the bracelets off one at a time. And this little girl is terrified. I can't play the video. There's an interview with her by Oakland reporter Dion Lim, and I'll talk about Dion in a second. You may recognize that name. But the little girl can't sleep. She can't sleep. Her appetite's screwed, and she's terrified these guys will come back. They've completely shattered her entire thought processes of being a child. Now she's a victim. And Glenn makes a very good detail about this. And the one thing to take away from it is that the robbers said, quote, "Don't worry, we won't kill or rape you. We're here for the money. You know, with COVID-19, we have no jobs, no money. That's what's making us do this." So the family has no money to cover bills and medical expenses. Now, who is Dion Lim? I don't know if I have it pulled up. Let me see here. No, I don't have it pulled up. But Dion Lim, I believe I covered this a couple weeks ago, was doing a hit off a street corner in Oakland about recent attacks on Oakland streets. And her and her camera crew were robbed. Some guys came up, demanded all the equipment and their cell phones, and took off. They actually drove up in a car, got out, and pulled that. So it was obviously a crime of opportunity. But these guys were also obviously cruising around looking for people to victimize. And this happened in broad daylight to a news reporter. It's all on tape. Just got the whole thing on tape. But the good news is there's a GoFundMe for Rosseni and Amy and the rest of the family. I will put the link to it in the chat. Give me just a moment to get back to that. I'm going to say something very mercenary. Please forgive me. I don't mean this as any way disrespect to the family at all. They are certainly horrific victims and deserve all the help they can get. But I personally refuse to send money to GoFundMe. They are an incredibly mercenary organization that pulls valid requests off with no warnings and no valid reasons whatsoever. And if it doesn't fit their narrative, they won't put it up there. I'm surprised that this is up there, considering that it's pretty obvious who were the victimizers in this case. I'll leave it at that. Let's just say crime in Oakland is not necessarily white supremacy. Let me just put it that way. But there is a GoFundMe. Again, the link is in the chats. Currently, let me refresh it here. I just pulled it up about an hour ago. But currently, out of a goal of 30,000, they have raised a little over 108,000, including one donor who donated $5,000. There's been 817 people donated so far. And if you see fit to send this horribly traumatized family a few dollars, please feel free. Do not go by what I said to color your motives whatsoever. I wouldn't do that. I would never tell you what to do. I would ask. But in this particular instance, I'm not asking you to not help this family through GoFundMe. This is my personal thing. My personal thing. Anyway. Let's move on. So I didn't know if to put this in the COVID block, which is in the after show, or in the first block, I decided to go with the latter. As you know, one of the big things right now is school reopenings. We covered the story last week about how the San Diego School District's Teachers Union was refusing to go back to in-classroom learning any earlier than another 10 days from now. But they are more than willing to volunteer to walk into the San Diego Convention Center, which is full of illegal minors, and I meant that, illegal minors, UACs, who are testing at a positivity rate for the Wuhan virus at something like 100 times over what the school kids in Oakland, in San Diego are testing at. Boy, I get tripped up there. Yeah, the school kids are at about 0.03%, and the infection rate and the minors at the San Diego Convention Center are over 10%. You do the math. I guess that could be close to 300%. But that's what's going on. Now you remember, and I believe I played the clip when Jan Uliansaki said this, that the current administration's goal was to have most of K through 12 schools open for in-person learning in the first 100 days of the administration. And as was pointed out quite quickly, that had already been met, no thanks to anything this administration had done. In fact, this article here by Peter Svab from the Epoch Times, there's data out, according to a firm called Burbio, that's a community tracking firm. It crunches publicly available data collected from 1,200 school districts representing 35,000 schools in all 50 states. And it's showing that we have, quote unquote, achieved the 46 asterisk administration's goal, but without any help from the current administration. You'll remember the CDC came out with guidelines about a month ago that said explicitly that teachers did not need to be vaccinated in order to return to schools and be safe. That was not required. And the teachers' unions completely paid no attention to it, and 46 asterisk and his administration did nothing to call the teachers' unions out on it. They just sat back and watched it happen. While kids fall further and further and behind mentally, socially, emotionally, and I've got a piece coming up where child predation has gone up significantly as well. We'll get to that. But Burbio reported that the reopening trend started back in September of last year when school lockdowns had reached their zenith. Only 19% of students went to schools that offered traditional instruction on September 2nd. Reopenings proceeded at a pace of about 2% per week until November, when it reversed because of another wave of lockdowns. And then since January, the reopening resumed at a pace of about 2% per week. So starting this week, more than 55% of students will attend schools that offer traditional in-person instruction, including nearly 64% in elementary grades, over 50% in middle schools, and nearly 47% in high schools. So it is technically over 50%, but not all of them are over 50%. So let's try to hold this administration to some actual accountability as opposed to letting them slip on statistics alone. But look at this graph. This is what I just referenced here. It's always nice to see rather than just talk about something. And this is the percentage of K through 12 students attending schools offering traditional in-person learning as of April 5th. And again, this is according to the data firm Burbio. As you can see, the graph had a fairly steady rise from beginning of October last year up until November, where there was a flattening, and then we had the Thanksgiving surge of infection. So it dropped with a small raise. But then since January, when the vaccinations really started kicking in, you see a very steady rise. But you notice there's no sudden spike in this graph. It's simple addition. Simple addition, one after the other after the other. if the Biden administration, 46 asterisk at all, had anything to do with school reopenings, you'd have seen an increase in the rate of climb in this graph. And there isn't one. Now, they're going to crow from the rooftops that they achieved their goal ahead of schedule. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna from the highest on 46 asterisk at all, when in fact they've done nothing. This is another thing they're going to take credit for, where they've done absolutely zero to make it happen. We've already got the vaccination system well underway thanks to Operation Warp Speed and all of the great systems put in place by President Trump and Vice President Pence and their team, that hasn't spiked in any way, no pun intended, thanks to this administration. The climb there has been pretty steady. In fact, I have a really good graph on vaccination rates that I'm going to have in the after show. I think you're really going to like it. But yeah, so there's no way at all that 46 asterisk can take credit for this. And it gets worse because we're just talking about schools mainly in red states where mask mandates are coming down, where they're paying attention to the new CDC guideline that you can have children 3 feet apart as opposed to 6 feet apart, which means basically you can go back to almost full capacity in the school. But not happening all over the place. This is a fairly long article. I don't have time to go into all of it. I'll put the link to it in the chat. This, by the way, is an archive link. I have finally realized that I can do archiving as opposed to going to sources like the Washington Post or the New York Times for articles. I finally got my you-know-what together and started doing it properly. So this is the archive link to an article from the Washington Post, and it's titled, "Will School Be Back to Normal This Fall? Kind of, sort of, maybe." And it's basically pointing out how teachers' unions are still kicking, clawing, and screaming to not go back to the classroom anytime soon. That's basically what this article is about. There are some districts, mainly in conservative areas, that are planning on reopening full-time come fall. But there are others that aren't even close to making a plan yet. Some are talking about being able to pivot between full-time, part full-time, part online, and full online learning because they don't have a plan yet to open up full-time. And this is a direct result of teachers' unions. So again, you can peruse this article at your leisure. But I'll warn you right now, it's the Washington Post, so expect a lot of spin. A lot of spin. All right, continuing along. There's another archive article from the Washington Post. I came to this through a link in the article I just put up, and it's very eye-opening. It turns out that Asian American students are the least likely to come back to school since things went remote. And thank you so much, Homegoy. Thank you so much. And you would think that with the emphasis on education, that they would be the most likely to return. But in fact, it's white students who are most likely to return to the classroom by a pretty high percentage. And there are a number of factors in this article regarding why Asian Americans are not coming back to the classroom. Some of it is due to really, really poor classroom conditions in school systems like the New York City public school system, where buildings are considerably in a state of disrepair. The bathrooms are always dirty. The heating and cooling don't work. And there's mold in the basements. Now, don't forget, there are hundreds of billions of dollars out there for these schools. There's $60 billion sitting in a fund right now from one of the COVID relief bills that was passed last year that has not been used by schools. And it's sitting there waiting. All they have to do is put in an application for the money and boom, they get a check. And it's just sitting there. And this administration has already promised hundreds billions more over the next 4 to 6 years. And it's not getting done. Another reason that Asian Americans are coming back are things like language barriers, the support structure to help students who don't speak English well. That's fallen off the wayside with these COVID shutdowns. Support staff aren't coming back as quickly as other staff, if at all. And that article also cites fear of attacks. Okay, fine. That's a valid thing. They quoted a couple parents who say that their children have been subjected, to attacks in school. But of course, the Washington Post blames it on President Trump for saying China virus, and then they also lie and say he used the term Kung flu, which of course never happened. Only one person has ever accused the Trump administration of using that term, and it wasn't Trump. It was a quote unquote White House staffer, according to the reporter, who, when called out by Kellyanne Conway, would not name the supposed person who used that term. The reporter being Asian and therefore taking Kung flu as a racial slur. And again, there was every opportunity for this reporter to come forward and name the individual. Kellyanne Conway said on camera, "We'll go in there right now and we'll take care of this." Suddenly, silence, crickets, and it was never brought up again. But the Washington Post is not above continuing to slander people with out-and-out lies. So again, if you read this article, the link to it is in the archive piece. All you have to do, by the way, to go to archives, in case you're wondering, just go to archive.is, and there will be a window. All you have to do is find the article and go to where the link is in your whatever search engine you're using, and right-click and click Copy Link. Then go to archive.is, put the link in the web browser window, the search window, click Search, and within no more than a minute, depending on the length of the article and how old it is, it'll come up. I haven't missed yet. Very simple to use. I'd like to welcome SRS4859 to the YouTube chat. Very nice to see you, sir. Nice to see you live. Please look at the pinned comment, just in case. And also looking at Watt's addition to the chat. Yes, it was horrible. I'm sure you're referring to the crimes I was just describing. Absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. All right, continuing along. Chicago. Weather's warming up here, folks. It was really nice this weekend. I was able to get out and have a cigar. Saturday, a good friend of ours came over in his new used Dodge Caravan. He was driving a Toyota 4Runner before. I won't go into the circumstances that created the need for a Caravan, but let's just say when you see a guy who's about to turn 30 drive up in a Dodge Caravan, you know his life has taken a turn, and I won't describe whether or not it's for the worse or not. But anyway, we had a wonderful day outside, got a couple cigars in, had a great time, and then yesterday I stayed inside. It was a little chilly, and it's very nice outside right now. The sun finally came out. But of course, when the weather warms up around here, that means the murder rate in Chicago skyrockets. And this weekend was no exception. Article here from the Epoch Times by Zachary Steiber. In Chicago over the weekend, that would be between 5 p.m. Friday and 11:59 in the evening Sunday. 34 people in the Chicago metro area were shot and 8 were killed. I can't begin to read all of the stories that are in this article. They are legion. A couple of people that I saw here were taken to the hospital I used to work at, Loyola University Medical Center in Maywood. But there were people who were driving along and their cars were struck by bullets, by a passing vehicle, and in another case by 2 guys on 2 orange dirt bikes. Dirt bikes are not a common thing in Chicago by any stretch. But at least they didn't used to be. Maybe I'm behind the times. But these bikes, these motorcycles pulled up alongside this vehicle and pumped rounds into it. And a 19-year-old was in the car and they were killed. And then there was another person in the car who is in critical condition at St. Mary's in Chicago right now. And there were a number of other shootings. And as you might expect, no suspects are in custody for any of the shootings that took place over the weekend. The previous weekend saw 23 shootings, 30 people shot, and 3 murders. So Chicago, folks. Moving up one state to the north as we continue in our block of state news. My governor, whom I hate with a passion, the heat of 1,000 suns could not begin to compare to the absolute hatred I have for our governor, Tony Evers. Tony Evers is completely responsible for the 3 nights of rioting, looting, arson, and destruction that happened here in Kenosha that also resulted in the deaths of 2 individuals and the wounding of a 3rd. Now, we all know about those shootings. I'm not going to get into that since I'm on YouTube. But let's just say that was not the way it's been charged. I'm going to leave it at that. But since our governor decided right away to stick his neck out and declare that the shooting of Jacob Blake by a Kenosha police officer was racially motivated, well, boom! That set the powder keg on fire. Our mayor did the same thing immediately after the shooting news came out. Called it a racially biased shooting. Because a white officer shot a black guy who had a knife, who was attempting to steal a vehicle after struggling with officers who tried to arrest him when he violated a restraining order against a woman who had accused him of sexual assault. Jacob Blake's the victim here, folks. Remember? Jacob Blake's the victim. So he struggles with the officers, takes them to the ground. They tase him twice, shrugs it off, gets into the car, and as with children in the car, 3 children, and it wasn't even his car. He's stealing it. So he is committing multiple major felonies. And if he gets away with a deadly weapon and these kids in a car, you don't know what's going to happen. So the officer made a split-second decision, and he shot Jacob Blake in the back 7 times. Jacob Blake is now paralyzed from the waist down due to damage to his spinal cord from the shooting. As I understand it, the state has decided to pretty much waive any of the charges involved in the altercation with the police. They also gave him a sweetheart deal on the sexual assault charges that were pending. I don't remember if he got a cash settlement or not. I wouldn't be surprised. But our state is also famous for the way we ran the 2020 election. The way we completely opened the floodgates for indefinitely incapacitated voting, where you can, at this time, you were able to claim anything you wanted to in order to qualify for that ballot. And there were a number of other irregularities that happened. You may well remember that the Trump campaign committee and some other lawyers went after Wisconsin for the irregularities in the voting. The state Supreme Court ultimately ruled in favor of the state 4-3, with the swing judge being one of the conservatives on the bench. They did find that there were massive irregularities in the voting, but they refused to do anything about it. Well, now my governor is demanding that the Trump team and Sidney Powell, one of the lawyers involved in a number of the suits, mainly involving Dominion, pay over $100,000 in legal fees that Wisconsin incurred while defending themselves in court. Right. Best of luck. So here's a quote from the court papers that the state filed last week. A message must be sent that this type of behavior cannot be tolerated in the judicial system, and that attorneys should avoid these types of frivolous attempts to disenfranchise voters in the future. The litigation imposed significant costs on the taxpayers of Wisconsin. Those costs were needless because Trump's suit never had any merit. This litigation was precluded by exclusive state court proceedings, and the costs were exacerbated by strategic choices made by Trump and his lawyers. So that's my governor. All right, that's his side. Here is a quote from William Bach, one of Trump's lawyers, and it's according to Reuters. We deny the claims. They're attacking and pleading my motives and the motives of my partners, of which they know nothing. The statements made about our motives were absolutely false. And Sidney Powell said of Evers' request, quote, "It's baseless, improper, and out of time. The case is closed." So we'll have to see what happens there. But I don't have a feeling that Wisconsin is going to recoup those legal fees. They would have to prove, as I understand it, and Laura, please correct me if I'm wrong, they would have to prove malfeasance in the filings, that they were deliberately without merit in order to drag Wisconsin and Arizona, with another state named in the suit, into court. And I'd be very, very fascinated to find those facts and evidence anywhere. So I don't see Wisconsin getting a dime out of this. But then again, I thought the courts were going to do the right thing last year and early this year, and that didn't happen. So obviously I don't know a damn thing about the legal system in this country. So moving west for a second, California. I love doing these state blocks. I love getting around the country and seeing what's happening as opposed to just focusing on Washington news, the administration, blah, 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 blah. I like to move around. I hope you guys enjoy these too. But you may remember that the National Labor Relations Board ruled earlier this year that Tesla had violated U.S. labor law regarding a firing of an individual that the NLRB, I always have trouble with that one, said was illegal. He shouldn't have been fired. They're demanding that Tesla rehire the person. And they're also saying that Tesla violated law regarding unionizing at the company. So what's this tweet we're talking about? This in 2018, while the UAW was trying to unionize the California Tesla factory, Elon Musk did the following, quote, "Nothing stopping Tesla team at our car plant from voting union. Could do so tomorrow if they wanted. But why pay union dues and give up stock options for nothing? Our safety record is twice better than when plant was UAW and everybody already gets health care." So for some reason, the NLRB determined that that was a union busting tweet and not allowed. Well, Elon has not deleted the tweet, and he is also fighting against other rulings in which the NLRB, God, I hate that, said that the Tesla had to go also as far as to allow distributing union literature in its parking lot on non-work time, and also allow distributing union stickers, leaflets, and pamphlets without first obtaining permission from management. Those are seen by the NLRB as union busting activities, and they're trying to come down hard on Elon. Well, the import of this particular story from the Reuters pickup by the Epoch Times is that Tesla has filed an appeal, and they are asking for relief from any further relief which a court deems just, and I should say they're asking for any further relief which a court deems just and equitable, along with reviewing the order about rehiring that person, allowing the union activities that I just described, and making Elon take down that tweet. So let's see what's going on there. Moving on to, I'm a little far down on the page there, pardon me. New York. Obviously, New York State has been in the news a bunch since, 13 months ago when COVID hit. Excuse me. Liquid IV, by the way. I love this stuff. New York was hit very, very heavily with the virus, especially New York City. They did everything wrong. We all know that Cuomo directed in March of last year that hospitals were to dump COVID positive patients back into nursing homes, even while they were still recovering. As long as they were considered medically stable, they were to be kicked out of the hospital and put in these homes. Now, the reasoning for that was supposedly that the hospitals were going to be overrun. Well, of course, that never happened. The New York hospitals were never overrun. And even if they had been in danger of doing so, they had almost 3,000 beds at the Javits Center that were set up specifically to handle quarantining COVID patients. And they also had the USS Mercy, the USNS Mercy, the hospital ship, one of two hospital ships in the U.S. Navy. I believe Mercy was in New York Harbor and Hope was in California at the L.A. Harbor. Neither were used to any extent. I think the Mercy saw a total of 7 patients. But Cuomo still persisted in shipping these patients back to nursing homes. And as I've referenced quite often, a watchdog group in New York State has determined that at least 1,000 extra nursing home patients died as a result of those policies, at least. And I'm waiting for more details to come out on that. Cuomo is also, of course, heavily under fire for his sexual harassment allegations against him, by a number of women. I believe we're up to 12 now, 9 or 12, somewhere in there. Can't count them on one hand anymore, that's for sure. But we also know that New York State has been under a big budget crunch for some time now. They have a horribly underfunded public pension program. They keep taxing people to death, and then those people leave the state, and they lose that tax base. They've driven thousands of people out of New York City, people from Manhattan, who were keeping the city afloat, paying massive taxes. Because remember, there's a New York City tax above and beyond the New York State tax. Well, that's not enough for Cuomo and de Blasio and the rest of those New York goons. They're now talking about raising taxes to make New York State the highest tax rate for millionaires and above in the country. California currently has that record. But if this bill, this tax hike gets through the New York House and Senate and lands on Cuomo's desk, it's going to become law. And they are going to absolutely nail anyone making $1 million or more a year in New York State. So I've got an article here from the New York Post about this by Bernadette Hogan and Tamar Lappin. And let me get to the numbers here. By the way, again, this is after New York State got tens of billions of dollars from 46 asterisk in that last bill, that last quote-unquote relief bill. So according to sources in New York, they're thinking they're going to raise an additional $5 billion with this tax hike. Not at all considering how many people are going to leave the state for Florida when they realize that they can't afford to live there anymore. This is the most short-sighted, typical Democrat move I could ever hope to see, and they do it time and time again. They never, ever learn. So one thing about Democrats, they don't understand consequences. They never understand consequences. So if these rates go in, if you live in New York City and you're a millionaire, your combined tax would be between 13.5% and 14.8%. Right now in California, income over $1 million is taxed at 13.3%. This is insane. This is designed to ruin your tax base and to make the state even less financially sound than it is right now. They still haven't released the COVID lockdowns. In a number of areas, the businesses are barely operating at 25% capacity. They're insane. Open up your businesses and your tax revenue will come back and you won't have to do this. But it's not just raising taxes for the good of the state, say like fixing the New York City metro system, which is completely in a state of disrepair. It is falling apart at the seams. And it is probably the most used mass transit system in the country, by far. But seems that the Democrats are fighting over themselves, pardon me, between themselves, over a particular part of this tax hike bill. They want a bunch of this to go to excluded workers. They have something called the Excluded Workers Fund, which is supposed to be carving out $2.1 billion from this budget. And I'm getting this from the New York Post, again, by Bernadette Hogan, and this time Carl Campanile. This Excluded Workers Fund would provide checks to an estimated 300,000 New Yorkers impacted by the virus who are ineligible to receive federal unemployment benefits and pandemic-related aid due to issues like immigration status. They want to hand out thousands and thousands of dollars, more than you and I have seen from these federal quote-unquote stimulus bills. They're going to hand out thousands more than that to illegals with barely any proof of work-related losses required. They're also talking about handing out some of this money to the, quote, recently incarcerated. Now, thankfully, not all the Democrats in New York are lining up behind this. There are some sane Democrats in that state, especially from Long Island. Long Island has a pretty decent head on its shoulders. My brother-in-law lives in Dix Hills, or at least did. I think he's moved recently. But the Dix Hills public school system is one of the best in the country. They have I have a niece, with Down syndrome, and the care for her was exemplary. Came out of their taxes. They didn't have to pay a dime extra. Of course, the taxes are very high, but look at what they got for it. Their daughter received the best education she possibly could have. She was able to stay in the program for, I think, 2 years beyond her high school graduation date. There are all kinds of work opportunities, recreational things. There's a theater designed specifically for special needs children that she loves to be in. She's a starlet. She loves to be in front of the camera, loves to be the first one on stage. In fact, give her a role as a tree in the Easter pageant, and she will be the last thing to leave the stage. Every time. It's hilarious. And I'd like to welcome Mayphil to D-Live. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoy it. Or is it May, Florida? Yeah, Skullcram probably just corrected me. May, Florida. Nice to have you. Thank you. So anyway, so there are some Democrats who are thinking that this is a bad idea, and they're not going along with it. So that's one of the things that's stalling this tax bill right now, is the fight over this Excluded Workers Fund. So we'll have to see what happens there. All right, I got a little bit of time left. I want to touch on China and Taiwan real quickly. You know I pay a lot of attention to that. Real briefly, Taiwan has seen a new incursion in its air defense identification zone by Chinese jets, Chinese warplanes specifically. Last month, Taiwan reported 20 Chinese aircraft were involved in one such incursion. In the latest incident, by the way, this is from Reuters off the Epoch Times. In the latest incident, Taiwan's defense ministry said 4 Chinese J-16 and 4 J-10 fighters were involved, as well as an early warning plane and anti-submarine aircraft, the latter of which flew to the south of Taiwan through the Bashi Channel that connects the Pacific to the South China Sea. Taiwan's Air Force sent up a combat air patrol and warned the Chinese aircraft away. By the way, according to an intercepted transmission from one of the Chinese pilots as they were being escorted away from Taiwanese airspace, although they weren't in any hurry to leave, one of the Chinese pilots supposedly said, when told to exit the airspace, he answered, "This is ours." And as I've said time and time again, Taiwan is in imminent danger of being invaded by China. And these incursions are nothing more than drills for the Chinese Air Force to bomb Taiwan and attack its Air Force on the ground. As they keep making these incursions, they're daring the Taiwanese Air Force to engage them. Now, whether or not a Taiwanese pilot would be able to win in a dogfight over a Chinese pilot is immaterial. If any action is taken against one of these Chinese aircraft, China will initially declare a full-on war on Taiwan, and the invasion will start. And it will start with heavy bombardment by rockets and air-launched air-to-surface missiles. I guarantee it. Taiwan is currently beefing up its defense systems right now, including coastal batteries that can take out Chinese vessels as they cross the strait between mainland China and Taiwan. Because, of course, if Taiwan is going to take over Taiwan, it'll have to physically invade it. You can't drop in paratroops enough to take over a country. It just doesn't work that way. They would have to physically invade the shores. But they're daring Taiwan to shoot one of them down. And since Taiwan has to hold its fire, that allows the Chinese aircraft to operate with impunity in Taiwanese airspace. So they can get well within launch range without having to worry about Taiwanese interception. It'll be too late. And they're also trying to weaken the physical abilities of the Taiwanese Air Force by constantly making them scramble jets to intercept the Chinese aircraft. You have to send up the jets. You can't just sit there on the ground and let these things fly all over. You have to send things up. And they're trying to tire out the Taiwanese Air Force. It's a small Air Force, and the more sorties you fly, that's more wear on the pilots and that's more wear on the aircraft. So you need longer rest times and you need more maintenance. It's lose for the Taiwanese with this. Lose. Very briefly, there are more warnings that the invasion timeline for China coming into Taiwan is being moved up. Our current military people have been saying that they expect something to happen within the next 8 to 10 years. There are experts who are now warning it could be closer to 6 or sooner, 6 at the outside. Many people are saying China wouldn't dare do it before the 2022 Olympics. We'll see. As I've stated often, Xi Jinping is in the hot seat. He has people coming after him. There's no such thing as a restful time period on top of the Chinese Communist Party, or any Communist Party for that matter. People always have the long knives out and they're coming for you. And Xi knows that invading Taiwan quickly, with minimal losses, would secure his position in power for quite some time. But if he doesn't do it before Taiwan beefs up its defenses to the point where it can stave off an attack to a decent extent at least, and bleed the Chinese dry several times, then he's out. He's out on it, and he's probably going to wind up in a re-education camp. So it is getting ugly. Good news for our Antipodean friends. The U.S. and Australia are putting their heads together on this very problem. As you know, there is the Quad Pact between Japan, Taiwan, Japan, the U.S., Australia, and India. It's called the Quad Pact. And they've all vowed to defend the South China Sea against any Chinese military action. And the U.S. and Australia are also in deep consultation with each other right now, working out contingencies, and that's a quote, contingencies, on what would happen if there's an outbreak of conflict around Taiwan. And I'm getting that from, again, the Epoch Times by Daniel Y. Tang. So important news there. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Let's hope, pray to God, it doesn't come to that. All right, YouTube. I'm saying goodbye to you. Thank you for being here. Again, if you would like to see the whole show, please go to dlive.tv/AHNC. It's that simple. It's an easy-to-use app. In fact, it's quite robust. I like it. It works on my phone perfectly. It has a great chat, really cool stickers and GIFs. The microtransaction system is very addicting. In fact, not only do you get to give money to me, I get to give money to you. Win-win there. Our chat here on DLive is really one of the best. It really is. I love the people in the chat, as well as all you people who watch either live or on Rumble and Gab TV after I finish the show. But Still, you all mean a lot to us, but I'm telling you, when you're in the chat, it's just a great experience. It really is. I wish I could pay more attention to it than I do. All right, YouTube. Bye-bye. Let's see. Bam.